Welcome to one of the most incredible stories you've never heard about World War II. While most resistance fighters hid in shadows and struck at night, 3 Jewish brothers in Belarus did something nobody thought was possible. They didn't just fight the Nazis. They built an entire civilization in the forest while waging guerrilla war. And they saved 1,200 lives in the process. This is the story of the Bielski partisans, the largest armed rescue of Jews by Jews during the Holocaust. And it all started with a choice that would have gotten most people killed. Picture this. It's December 1941. The small town of Nowogrodek in Belarus. 28-year-old Tuvia Bielski comes home to find his parents murdered. His 2 younger sisters shot in a mass grave with 5,000 other Jews. The Nazis and their local collaborators are systematically wiping out every Jewish community in the region. Most survivors are running toward the ghettos, thinking there's safety in numbers. Tuvia makes a different choice. He runs into the forest. But here's what makes this story different from every other resistance tale you've heard. Tuvia doesn't just want revenge. He wants to save lives. His younger brother Zuz, age 25, is all about fighting. Their middle brother Asael, 23, is the quiet one who keeps them both alive. And when they meet in the Naliboki forest in early 1942, they have 13 people with them. Mostly family. All of them armed with exactly 4 rifles between them. Tuvia tells them something that sounds insane. We're not running. We're not hiding. We're building something here. And we're going to save every Jew we can find. Zuz thinks his brother has lost his mind. Asael stays quiet. But here's the thing about Tuvia Bielski. Before the war, he was a truck driver who spoke 4 languages and had a reputation for getting out of impossible situations. The Soviets had arrested him in 1939 for being a capitalist. He talked his way out. The Germans came in 1941. He talked his way past checkpoints. The man had a gift for survival. And now he was going to use it to save hundreds. Let's talk about what they were up against. The Naliboki forest covers 870 square miles of swampland, dense trees, and wolves. Winter temperatures drop to 40 below zero. There's no food except what you can hunt or steal. And it's crawling with 3 different groups who want Jews dead. The Wehrmacht, the SS, and local collaborators who know every trail and hiding spot. Most partisan groups in Belarus were Soviet-backed fighters. Tough bastards who lived for ambushes and sabotage. But they had a problem with Jews. They'd take young men who could fight, sure. But old people, women, children. One Soviet commander told Tuvia straight up, "We don't need more mouths to feed. We need soldiers." Tuvia's response became legendary in the forest. "I would rather save 1 old Jewish woman than kill 10 German soldiers." That sentence right there split the partisan movement in 2. Because Tuvia wasn't just building a fighting unit. He was building a refuge. And word started spreading through the ghettos. There's a group in the Naliboki forest. They take everyone. They turn nobody away. By summer of 1942, they had 150 people. By fall, 300. And here's where the miracle starts happening. Meet Hanan Lefkowitz, 47 years old. Tailor from Lida. Shows up in the forest with his wife, his mother-in-law, and his 3 kids. The youngest is 8. Hanan's thinking, we're dead weight. They'll send us away. But Tuvia walks up, shakes his hand, and says, "Can you sew? We need uniforms. You're hired." That's the genius of it. Tuvia organized the forest camp like a functioning town. You had skills? You worked. Tailors made clothes. Cobblers fixed shoes. Carpenters built shelters. A guy named Yehuda Polonsky was a watchmaker before the war. In the forest? He became a gunsmith, repairing weapons they stole from German supply depots. But feeding 300 people in a forest? That's where Zuz came in. Zuz Bielski was everything Tuvia wasn't. Hot-tempered, aggressive, built like a bull. He'd grown up getting into fistfights with anti-Semitic neighbors and usually winning. Now he led the raids. And holy crap were they bold. Picture this, October 1942. A German supply column is heading toward Minsk. 20 trucks full of food, medicine, and ammunition. Zuz takes 40 men, most of them armed with weapons they'd captured in previous raids. They set up an ambush on a narrow forest road. The Germans never saw it coming. The Bielski fighters hit the convoy from both sides, killed the guards, and vanished into the forest with enough supplies to feed the camp for 2 months. But here's the part that pisses off the Soviet partisans. Zuz doesn't just take weapons. He takes everything. Food, medicine, cooking pots. Because back at camp, there are 300 people depending on him. The Soviet commander, a guy named Viktor Panchenkov, confronts Tuvia. "You're wasting fighting men on babysitting civilians. Join us." Send the others to the ghettos. Tuvia's response? You go to hell. We protect our own. And that's when things get complicated. Because Tuvia and Zuz aren't just fighting Germans. They're fighting Soviet partisan commanders who see them as competition. They're fighting local police who know their families. And they're fighting the hardest battle of all, keeping hope alive when everything says they should give up. Let me tell you about life in that forest camp. Because this wasn't some temporary hideout. This was a functioning community. By spring of 1943, they had 600 people. They dug bunkers 8 feet underground, lined with logs and covered with earth. Each bunker held 30 people. They built a communal kitchen that served hot meals twice a day, a workshop for repairing weapons and tools, a medical station run by a doctor named Hirsch who'd escaped the Lida ghetto. And here's the part that'll blow your mind, they had a school. 16 children under age 10, sitting in a dugout shelter, learning to read and write by candlelight while Nazi patrols searched for them a mile away. The teacher was a woman named Sarah Silberstein, 29, who'd been a kindergarten teacher in Novogrudek. She'd watched the SS murder her husband and both her parents. But every morning she taught those kids their lessons. Math, history, Hebrew prayers. One of her students, a kid named Israel Lazar, 8 years old, wrote in his diary, "Today we learned about King David. Miss Sarah says David was small but brave. She says we are like David. The Germans are Goliath. I hope she is right." That diary survived. Israel didn't. He died of typhus in winter of 1943. But his sister kept that diary for 70 years. Now let's talk about the fighters. Because while Tuvia was building civilization and Zuz was raiding supply lines, the third brother Asael was doing something just as important. He was training an army. Asael Bielski was 24 years old and built like a bear. Quiet guy who never raised his voice. But he'd served in the Polish army before the war and he knew tactics. He took 17-year-old boys who'd never held a gun and turned them into soldiers who could hit a target at 100 yards in the dark. One of those boys was Aaron Bielski. Not related to the brothers, different family. 16 years old when he arrived at camp. His entire family murdered in the Novogrudek massacre. Kid was so traumatized he couldn't speak for the first week. Just sat in a bunker, staring at nothing. Asael handed him a rifle. Taught him to clean it, load it, fire it. Gave him a purpose. 6 months later, Aaron was leading ambush parties against German patrols. He wrote in a letter to a friend who'd escaped to Palestine, "I have killed 11 Germans. I feel nothing when I pull the trigger. These are not men. These are the things that murdered my mother." That letter is in the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C. Aaron survived the war, moved to Israel, became a teacher, never fired a gun again. But here's what most people don't understand about the Bielski camp. It wasn't just about survival or revenge. It was about maintaining humanity in the face of complete evil. And that meant making impossible choices. Winter of 1942 to 43 was the worst. Temperatures hit -40. The forest turned into a frozen hell. People were dying of exposure, starvation, and disease. The SS launched a massive operation called Operation Hamburg, sending 15,000 troops into the Naliboki forest to wipe out partisan groups. Tuvia had to make a choice. They could stay hidden and watch people freeze to death. Or they could risk everything and raid nearby villages for food and warm clothes. He chose to raid. But here's where it gets morally complicated. Some of those villages had collaborated with the Nazis, helped them identify Jews, pointed out hiding places. The collaborators had names, faces, families of their own. And when Zuz led raids on those villages, people died. Not just collaborators. Sometimes their families too, caught in crossfire. A German police officer named Klaus Weber wrote in his diary about finding one of these raided villages. "The Jewish bandits hit Naliboki village last night. 12 dead, including women and children. The brutality is shocking. I thought we were fighting subhumans, but perhaps we created them." That diary entry is chilling, because it shows something we need to understand. Even some Germans were starting to question what they'd unleashed. Weber wasn't a good guy. He'd participated in mass executions earlier in the war. But by 1943, even he was seeing the madness of it all. Meanwhile, in the forest, Tuvia was dealing with his own moral crisis. A young man named Burl Seplovich, 22, came to him with a problem. Burl had discovered his cousin was spying for the Germans, giving away partisan positions, getting people killed. The cousin's name was Shloim. He was 19 years old, scared, starving. The Germans had promised him food and safety for his mother if he cooperated. Tuvia called a council. Zuz wanted to shoot Shloim immediately. Some of the older men argued for mercy. The kid was terrified, he didn't know what he was doing. Tuvia listened to everyone. Then he made his decision. Shloim was executed the next morning, shot by his own cousin Burl. Justice in the forest was harsh and immediate, because one spy could get 600 people killed. Tuvia wrote later, "That day I became what I swore I'd never be, a man who kills his own people. But I had 600 lives to protect. What choice did I have?" That's the tragedy nobody talks about. The Bielski partisans weren't perfect heroes. They were desperate people making impossible choices in impossible circumstances. They stole. They killed collaborators. They executed spies. And they did it all while trying to maintain some shred of their humanity. But here's what makes their story different. Even in that darkness, they found light. Let me tell you about the weddings. Yes, weddings. In a forest, while being hunted by Nazis. Spring of 1943. A young couple named Yitzhak and Chaya wanted to get married. Yitzhak was 24 from Lida. Chaya was 21 from Novogrudek. They'd met in the forest 3 months earlier. Both had lost their entire families. And they wanted something normal. Something human. Something that said, we're still alive. We still have hope. Tuvia didn't just allow it. He organized it. They found a rabbi hiding in the camp, 82 years old, who performed the ceremony. Someone traded a German rifle for a white tablecloth. The women made a wedding dress from parachute silk they'd stolen from a supply drop. Somebody played a fiddle. 600 people attended that wedding. Standing in a forest clearing, surrounded by guards with rifles, they sang and danced and celebrated life in the middle of death. A woman named Rachel Sluka wrote about it. "For 2 hours we forgot the war. We forgot the Nazis. We were just Jews celebrating a wedding like our grandparents had done for 1,000 years." Yitzhak and Chaya survived the war. They had 4 children. Moved to Brooklyn. Yitzhak died in 1987. At his funeral, Chaya said, "We won. We got married in Hitler's forest and we won." 17 couples got married in that forest camp between 1942 and 1944. 10 babies were born there, including one in the middle of a German encirclement operation. The mother's name was Sonia Bielski, no relation to the brothers. She went into labor while the camp was being evacuated ahead of a Nazi sweep. Asel Bielski carried her 4 miles through the forest on his back while contractions hit. Dr. Hirsch delivered the baby in a dugout shelter while machine gun fire echoed 2 miles away. A girl. They named her Vida. It means life in Spanish. She's 79 years old now, living in Tel Aviv. But let's talk about the darkest moment. Because every story has one. And for the Bielski partisans, it came in July 1943. The SS launched Operation Kotbus. 20,000 troops, supported by aircraft and artillery, sweeping through the Naliboki forest. Their goal? Exterminate all partisan groups. The operation lasted 3 weeks. And the Bielski camp, now 800 people, was directly in their path. Tuvia made the call to split up. The fighters would create diversions, draw the Germans away. The civilians, women, children, elderly, would move deeper into the swamp lands where German trucks couldn't follow. For 5 days they moved through swamps. Water up to their waists. Children on shoulders. Old people being carried on improvised stretchers. No fires. No hot food. German aircraft overhead, strafing anything that moved. An 8-year-old girl named Lilka Dworska wrote in her diary, "Mama says be quiet or the planes will find us. I am hungry. I am cold. I am wet. I'm scared. But I am quiet." 37 people died in that march. Mostly elderly who couldn't survive the exposure. But here's the gut punch. Tuvia had to order the column to keep moving. They couldn't stop to bury the dead. Couldn't risk the living for the dead. A man named Michael Lebanon, 63, fell behind. His daughter Mira stayed with him, refusing to leave. Tuvia personally came back for them. Found Michael dead, hypothermia. Found Mira sitting next to her father's body, holding his hand. Tuvia said, "We have to go." Mira said, "I can't leave him like this." Tuvia said, "He's gone. You're not. He'd want you to live." And they left Michael's body in that swamp. Mira survived the war. She never forgave herself for leaving her father. Never forgave Tuvia for making her leave. Some choices don't have good options. Meanwhile, Zuz and Asael were fighting the most important battle of the entire war for the partisans. And losing. The Germans had trapped a group of 200 Soviet partisans in a clearing. Surrounded them with machine guns and mortars. It was a massacre in progress. The Soviet commander sent a runner to the Bielski camp. "Help us or we all die." Here's the thing. Tuvia hated that Soviet commander. The guy had called them cowards, had refused to share weapons, had told them to abandon their civilians. This was the perfect moment to let karma do its work. Zuz and Asal went anyway, took 60 fighters, hit the German flank so hard they broke the encirclement, saved 180 Soviet partisans. The Soviet commander, Viktor Panchenkov, found Zuz after the battle, shook his hand, said 4 words, "I was wrong. Forgive me." That moment changed everything. The Soviet partisans started coordinating with the Bielski group, sharing intelligence, sharing weapons. That alliance kept both groups alive through the rest of the war. But on the German side, something else was happening, something nobody expected. Meet Hauptmann Friedrich Braun, 36 years old, Wehrmacht officer from Bavaria, career soldier. Not SS, not a true believer, just a guy following orders. His unit was tasked with anti-partisan operations in the Naliboki forest. Braun kept a detailed diary, and reading it 70 years later is haunting, because you watch a man slowly realize he's fighting for the wrong side. August 1943, cleared another village today. Jewish partisans had been there, found evidence of their camp, crude shelters, children's toys. Children. What kind of bandits bring children to war? Unless they have no other choice. September 1943, interrogated a captured partisan. Girl, maybe 17. She said her entire family was shot in Nowogrodek. She joined the forest group because where else could she go? I keep thinking of my niece. Same age. What would she do in this girl's situation? November 1943, we captured a Jewish fighter today. Old man, maybe 60. Armed with a rifle, older than I am. He said he was a carpenter before the war. Built furniture. Now he builds bunkers and kills Germans. He asked me why we were doing this. I had no answer, I believed. January 1944, transfer request denied again. They want me to stay in this forest hunting families. This isn't war. This is murder with a uniform. Braun deserted in March 1944. Walked away from his unit. Spent the rest of the war hiding in a monastery. His diary was found by Allied investigators after the war. He died in 1953, never prosecuted. But his diary shows something crucial. Not every German was a monster. Some of them were just men who realized too late they were part of something evil. By spring of 1944, the Bielski camp had grown to 1,230 people. The largest Jewish resistance group in occupied Europe. They'd survived 2 winters. Dozens of German operations. Disease. Starvation. Betrayal. And they'd done it while maintaining something the Nazis thought impossible. Hope. But the war was ending. The Soviet Red Army was pushing west. And that brought a new problem. The Soviets were liberating Belarus. But they weren't exactly friendly to independent partisan groups. Stalin didn't want armed groups that didn't answer to Moscow. And the Bielski partisans had spent 3 years refusing to take Soviet orders. When the Red Army reached the Naliboki forest in July 1944, they didn't greet the Bielski group as heroes. They arrested them as suspects. Tuvia, Zuz, and Asal were interrogated for 2 weeks. Accused of hoarding supplies. Accused of killing without orders. Accused of Jewish nationalism. The Soviet commissar didn't care that they'd saved 1,200 lives. He cared that they'd operated independently. A Soviet major named Dmitry Kolesnikov interrogated Tuvia. Asked him, "Why did you prioritize saving civilians over killing Germans?" Tuvia's response is recorded in Soviet archives. "Because we're not like you. We don't measure victory in body counts. We measure it in lives saved." That answer almost got him shot. But here's the irony. A Soviet Jewish officer named Yakov Greenstein intervened. Greenstein had lost his own family in the Babi Yar massacre. He saw what Tuvia had done. He understood. And he convinced the commissar to release them. The Bielski brothers were technically free. But they couldn't stay in Soviet Belarus. Stalin was already starting to persecute Jews again, calling them rootless cosmopolitans. So in 1945, the brothers did what they'd always done. They got out. Tuvia, Zuz, and Asal smuggled themselves out of Soviet territory. Made their way to Poland, then to Palestine, then finally to New York. They arrived in 1956 with nothing. Started over. Tuvia drove a delivery truck. Zuz worked in a factory. Asal had died in 1945, killed in combat fighting for the Red Army in the final days of the war. He was 27 years old. And here's the tragedy. Nobody knew their story. The Soviets had classified all partisan records. The brothers didn't talk about it. Tuvia spent 30 years driving trucks through Brooklyn and Queens. 30 years of other drivers cutting him off, of loading docks and traffic jams, and nobody knew the man delivering their furniture had saved 1,200 lives. Zeus once told his son, "In America, I'm nobody special. Just another immigrant. But in that forest? In that forest, I was a warrior." The story only came out in the 1980s when historians started accessing Soviet archives. By then, Tuvia had died. Heart attack in 1987, age 73. Worked until the day he died. His funeral was attended by 36 people. Small service in Brooklyn. But here's what happened next. Word spread through the survivor community. The people Tuvia had saved started coming forward, sharing their stories, showing their children and grandchildren who wouldn't exist without the Bielski brothers. In 1993, there was a gathering in Israel. 300 Bielski survivors and their descendants. More than 1,500 people total. 3 generations of families that existed because 3 brothers refused to accept that saving lives was impossible. One of those descendants is a woman named Ruth Mendelsohn. Her grandmother was saved by the Bielskis in 1943. Ruth is now a doctor in Tel Aviv. She has 3 children, 8 grandchildren, 13 people who exist because Tuvia Bielski decided that saving one old Jewish woman was worth more than killing 10 German soldiers. At that 1993 gathering, they did something beautiful. They planted 1,230 trees in a forest outside Jerusalem. One for every person the Bielski partisans saved. The forest is called Bielski Forest. You can visit it today. Walk among those trees. And remember that each tree represents not just a life saved, but all the lives that came after. Let's talk about the numbers, because they're staggering. 1,230 people survived the Bielski camp. By 2010, those survivors had 30,000 living descendants. 30,000 people who exist because 3 brothers said no to the Nazis and yes to hope. Doctors, teachers, engineers, artists, scientists, all alive because of a choice made in a Belarus forest 80 years ago. Compare that to the ghetto strategy. The Novogrodek ghetto? 5,000 people. 4 survived. The Lida ghetto? 8,000 people. 19 survived. The ghettos were death traps. The forest was life. But here's what haunts me about this story. Tuvia Bielski died thinking he'd failed. He'd wanted to save everyone. Thousands were still murdered. He carried that guilt to his grave. Zeus died in 1995, same thing. He'd see survivors at reunions and apologize for not saving their families. As if 3 men could have stopped the Holocaust. His son Alexander said at his funeral, "My father never understood what he accomplished. He only saw who he couldn't save." That's the burden every survivor carries. Every partisan. Every resistance fighter. They didn't save everyone. How could they? But they saved someone. And that someone had children. And those children had children. And the family tree keeps growing, branching out, a forest of lives that wouldn't exist without impossible courage. In 2008, a filmmaker named Edward Zwick made a movie about the Bielski partisans. Hollywood version, Daniel Craig playing Tuvia, explosions and heroics. The film took liberties with history, made it more cinematic. But it did something important. It told the story. And survivors came out of the woodwork. People who'd been silent for 60 years suddenly wanted to talk. They held reunions, published memoirs, gave testimony, because they realized their story mattered. Not just as history, as proof that resistance was possible, that humanity could survive even in hell. One of those survivors was a woman named Chaja Bielski, married to Asael before he was killed. She was 93 years old when she gave her last interview in 2013. Said something that stuck with me. People ask if we were heroes. No. Heroes are people who had a choice. We had no choice. We did what we had to do to live. The real question is, what would you do? That question hangs in the air. Because it's easy to judge from 80 years of distance. Easy to say what we would have done. But the truth is we don't know. We can't know. Until you're standing in that forest with your family murdered and Nazis hunting you, you have no idea what you're capable of. But here's what we do know. When faced with impossible evil, 3 brothers chose impossible hope. When everyone said it couldn't be done, they did it anyway. They built a community in chaos, maintained humanity in hell, and saved 1,200 lives that shouldn't have been saved. There's a memorial in Israel now. A stone wall with 1,230 names carved into it. Every person who walked out of that forest alive. At the bottom, there's a quote from Tuvia Bielski, "I would rather save one old Jewish woman than kill 10 German soldiers." That sentence became his legacy. Not the battles won or the Germans killed, that sentence, because it represents everything the Nazis tried to destroy, the belief that every life has value, that saving is more important than destroying, that hope is more powerful than hate. The Bielski story isn't just about World War II. It's about what humans are capable of when they refuse to accept evil as inevitable, when they choose life over death, community over isolation, hope over despair. Those 1,230 trees in that Israeli forest are growing right now, roots spreading, branches reaching toward the sun. A living memorial to three brothers who proved that resistance isn't just about fighting back. Sometimes, the bravest act of resistance is simply refusing to die. And 30,000 descendants are walking the earth today because three men in a Belarus forest decided that saving lives was worth any risk, any sacrifice, any cost. That forest is still there, by the way. The Naliboki Forest. 870 square miles of trees and swamps in Belarus. If you go there today, you can still find the bunkers. Collapsed now, overgrown with moss and roots. But they're there. Silent witnesses to one of history's most incredible stories. A story of brothers who became legends. Of civilians who became warriors. Of desperate people who built something beautiful in the darkest place imaginable. The Nazis wanted to erase the Jews from history. The Bielski brothers said, "Not today. Not here, not us," and they were right.